So it's no secret that I'm a big collector of physical media. I love DVDs, I own my fair share of Blu-rays, I own like 3 4Ks. I have a huge bin full of VHS tapes in my garage. I just love collecting movies. And I have this sort of underlying motivation for why I collect movies. Obviously, I'm an enormous cinephile, I just love movies in general, but for me, cinema is distinctly part of the overall artistic history of the human race. And with the way that movies have sort of retold classic stories of history as well as chronicling the events of basically the last 100 years of human civilization, I almost feel like it's my duty to collect movies. Like, the way I think about it when I buy a new movie is that, oh, well, if society just collapses one day and aliens come down and they're trying to reconstruct human culture based on its art forms, if they stumble across my DVD collection, that maybe they could use it as sort of a starting point to help reconstruct human society. As ridiculous as it sounds, it's something that I take genuinely seriously. But then I sat down and watched this movie and realized maybe aliens are too stupid to actually appreciate cinema the way I do. Maybe they don't deserve to consume the gracious art form of cinema because then they would just do shit like this. Happy New Year, everyone! I'm Ben, your underground conductor, and welcome to Underground Cinema. It has certainly been a while. If I'm being honest, after the new year started, I took a look back at 2024 and realized, oh, I basically spent the last 2 months of the year just doing back-to-back recording and editing. And as much as I love this channel, I decided I should give myself a little break, recuperate a bit, come back with something strong. And, well, I'm doing half of that. So this week, to help commemorate the new year, I will be covering 2025 Armageddon. Off to a great start, aren't we? I'll be completely honest, I only chose to make this my first review of the year because the movie is called 2025 Armageddon. Hopefully it's not a portent for things to come. Because, honestly, if the quality of this movie is any indication of what 2025 is going to be like, I think we're all in trouble. I'm also pretty sure that this is the first movie I've reviewed since Hellboy the Crooked Man where I don't physically own it. Which, yeah, I think for once I'm okay with that. Now, 2025 Armageddon is a disaster monster movie from the infamous cheap movie studio, The Asylum. Now, I would say that most people are probably not familiar with this particular film studio, but they're definitely familiar with their movies. Asylum has been around for nearly 30 years, and their entire gimmick as a studio is that they basically make cheap disaster movies and monster movies to tie into more popular movies that are being released by larger studios. When Columbia Pictures releases 2012, The Asylum releases 2012 Supernova. When Marvel Studios releases Thor, The Asylum releases Almighty Thor. And when Warner Brothers releases Snakes on a Plane, The Asylum releases Snakes on a Train. Pretty much all of Asylum's movies are like direct-to-video, so essentially what they're trying to do is trick the average consumer into purchasing one of their movies with the expectation that it's actually a bigger release from a bigger studio. And this is certainly a tactic that works. I mean, it worked on me and my family. Because years ago, when 2012 came out in theaters, my father actually went out to buy this Blu-ray copy of 2012 Supernova. At least I'm pretty sure he bought it. If I'm being frank, I have no idea how I got this Blu-ray. However, I know for a fact that I was certainly fooled. Because like 2 years ago, I went to like a Big Lots and bought this copy of Almighty Thor. Because I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's fun, like a Thor movie. And to be clear, I knew that it wasn't the Marvel Studios Thor. I just thought to myself, oh, it's a Thor movie. Blah, blah, blah. I had no idea it was from The Asylum. I just thought it was like a different adaptation of like the Norse mythology. If that's any better. Bottom line, The Asylum basically does what all YouTubers do, chasing popular trends in order to, like, make money off of them. And you know what? I gotta respect it. I gotta respect it. I do the exact same thing. I think all content creators do the exact same thing. Just follow what's popular. Now, to be clear, I am not a fan of The Asylum. I've seen some of their movies. I think everyone's seen at least one of their movies. I've actually seen 2012 Supernova. The Asylum also made, like, all the Sharknado movies, and I think I've seen 4 out of the 6 of them. I've also seen Lavalantula, which is the spin-off of the Sharknado franchise. Funny enough, actually not made by Asylum, which I thought was interesting. And, obviously, I've seen Snakes on a Train. I think that's probably their most famous movie outside of Sharknado. And, funny enough, Snakes on a Train is the movie that put their studio on the map. The movie was actually released 3 days before Snakes on a Plane was. And, Snakes on a Train, it's something. I wouldn't say it's better than Snakes on a Plane, but it's certainly more creative than Snakes on a Plane. I'll give it points for that. And also, the makeup effects are actually really good, surprisingly. But we're not talking about Snakes on a Plane today. Today we're talking about 2025 Armageddon, which is essentially Asylum's big team-up movie. Asylum released 2025 Armageddon as a promotional film to celebrate their 25th anniversary as a studio. That's very likely why the movie is called 2025 Armageddon, despite the fact that it came out in 2022. And what the movie does is that it takes a lot of their most famous monsters and, like, disaster concepts from their previous films and sort of just bundles them up into this one. And sitting down to actually watch this film, I don't necessarily think that they nailed the celebratory vibe that they were going for. So what happens in 2025 Armageddon? Well, the movie opens up in Washington, D.C. in 2006. We're introduced to 2 young girls, Madoylyn and Quinn, as they're spending time with their grandmother who's visiting them. Their grandmother, as a gift, brought over a brand new DVD copy of a movie that she believes the girls have wanted to watch. The DVD is actually Snakes on a Train. And the grandmothers are like, oh yeah, you girls have been wanting to see this movie, right? You know, it has that guy in it who's been in everything, and that's actually what she says in the movie. And obviously, in the context of the story, you can understand exactly what happened. The grandmother got confused because train and plane rhyme, probably picked up that DVD at like a Walmart or something, and said, oh, my granddaughters wanted to see the Snake movie, so here it is. So, this is Asylum basically acknowledging what their entire business model is, tricking people into thinking that they're getting more popular movies. Anyway, the girls thank their grandmother, they stick in the DVD, and they start watching. And for some reason, the DVD just starts on the goriest parts of Snakes on a Train. Obviously, editing-wise, what they're trying to do in this scene is highlight the more exciting aspects of the movie, because, like a lot of the Asylum films that I've seen, not a lot really happens in Snakes on a Train until something does. They turn off the movie when their father comes in. Their father makes a comment along the lines of, oh, I see you girls are working on your science project, I know you'll do well, make sure to stay quiet, your grandmother's sleeping. And I'm thinking to myself, how does he know that? He just got home from work. How did he know that the grandmother was sleeping? He just got there. I mean, it's not entirely outside the realm of possibility, but it's one of those things where it's like this movie just started, and there's just so many things where it's like, you're really on a rocky foundation here. Just little things here and there that signify, oh, this is an amateurish production. Like instances of choppy editing. There was a voiceover error, like at the 54-second mark. I had to rewind and check, because I was like, that's not what she said. But the father leaves the room, the girls continue the movie, then it pivots to them at the science fair as they've invented like this coat hanger magnet thing. I didn't have science fairs growing up, I don't know. But they win the science fair, and then it fast forwards years later. We don't know how many years later, because it just says present day. And, you know, this is actually sort of a recent pet peeve that I've developed with movies. Generally speaking, if you watch a movie when it comes out, and it starts in the past and then pivots to the present, you know, generally they'll say, oh, it's this year. But sometimes you get a movie, and it could be any movie. It could be an expensive studio film or a low-budget movie like this one. And it will just say present day. And it's like, what does that mean? I could watch this film 10 years from now. That's not the present day. And obviously, if you know what year the movie came out, you can put yourself in the headspace and figure it out easily. But this movie is supposed to take place in 2025, so present day would be 19 years later, and obviously it's 2025 now when I'm like recording this, but the movie came out in 2022, so if you're watching the movie when it came out, present day would be 2022. Like, there's an inconsistency there. That's a nitpick. It's just something that personally bothers me, and it's kind of odd with this film when you think about its release versus when it's supposed to take place. Like, just say the year it takes place. Like Kevin Costner, when he made The Postman, made sure that he said that that movie takes place in 2013. It's not that hard. But anyway, it fast forwards to the future, and one of the sisters, I think it's Quinn, she works for NASA, and she sees that, like, a huge, like, object just crashed into the International Space Station and took it out. You then pivot to the opening title of the film, 2025 Armageddon, and we switch over to the other sister, Madoylyn, as she is commanding her own naval vessel. Unfortunately, her ship is being attacked by a giant piranha, so she has to shoot at it. Now, a big issue I have with this film is that it was hard for me to keep track of the plot. One, because the editing was really choppy, but two, because there's just a lot going on, and the movie doesn't really do a great job investing you in, like, events. Like, it took me, like, 20 minutes to figure out, oh, these are the older versions of the girls from the cold open. Because the movie just didn't take its time to, like, invest you in the narrative. And people would say, oh, well, this is like a cheap direct-to-video movie, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 that. But, like, it doesn't matter how little your movie costs or how much money you spend on it. That does not excuse you from investing the viewer in the events as they occur. And especially when you make a movie like this that's meant to celebrate the 25th anniversary of your studio, you should make more of an effort to at least craft a coherent narrative. Like, I was barely 5 minutes into the movie and it was already losing me. Like, I honestly would have preferred it if we had spent a little longer in, like, the 2006 era when the girls were actually kids, and we'd spent time, like, watching them binge through, like, the Asylum movies. You know, that would have felt like more of a celebration of the studio and their work. It would show that these two characters are characters that have, like, bonded as siblings over, like, this grouping of, like, weird movies. And that would create, like, a better juxtaposition for later in the film, because it's established later in this film that the sisters are actually estranged. That's why they work in completely different branches of government. Anyway, after the ISS gets destroyed, Quinn goes to see her dad, who's like a cabinet member, and then we pivot over to like some other characters at the FCC, which are apparently like a married couple, and these two have like no chemistry together. Like, the movie had to keep reminding me that they were a couple. When you're initially introduced to them, you don't get the couple vibe, you get the, boss-assistant vibe. It's like that. And the FCC couple are sort of marveling over the fact that streaming numbers for the Asylum movies have gone up, and they don't exactly know why. So they're like, we should probably investigate this. Of course, before they decide to do that, the guy takes like 5 minutes to gush over how much he loves binging the Asylum movies when his wife goes to sleep. He even says that one of them made him cry. And I'm like, okay, Asylum, you can, this is your movie. You can jerk yourself off if you want to. Anyway, more monsters start appearing around the country. You get like a giant alligator that pops up in DC. You get a big robot that pops up as well. Obviously, everyone's confused, and there's also like alien spaceships flying around, but all the characters keep referring to them as drones, and I guess technically you could call them that. But the way the characters treat these quote-unquote drones, it's incredibly apparent that the actors in the film were not shown an image at all of what these final drones would look like. And that's a problem when you make a movie like this that uses a lot of like CGI. Obviously, you have trouble directing your actors because you have to instruct them on how to react to something that isn't in front of them. But if they don't have an image in their head at least, then there's going to be like an inconsistency between their performance and the final product. But anywho, DC is under attack. Quinn goes back to like see her father. Her father gets sworn in as the new president because apparently everyone else in the chain of succession has been killed. As they're escaping, their chopper ends up crashing near two robots duking it out, and as it turns out, the robot that won was actually being piloted by Madoylyn. So there's like a big happy family reunion that's acted very stiffly. And, that's just something you have to deal with in an Asylum movie. All the acting is kind of just flat in these films. None of the performances in this movie were particularly egregious. None of them really stuck out as like bad or like what's going on here. But there's really not any emotion in most of the scenes. Everyone's very wooden. And, I don't want to be mean about this, obviously. These are actors who are just working outside normal Hollywood. They're just trying to get work. I would do exactly the same thing in their position. I'm just saying that, if anything, they should have been directed better. That being said, I do think the fact that this family reunion is so awkward actually kind of does add to the narrative of this film, because in context of the story, the sisters are estranged, and also the father knows this. So even though there should be a joy with everyone being together, there's also sort of a disconnect with the family that hasn't been mended. Anyway, everyone retreats to the only place in the country where they'd be safe, a FEMA center. And the new president's all like, okay, we need to invite any survivors of this event here. They'll be safe at the FEMA center. That's, even if you're not familiar with the concept of foreshadowing, anyone with common sense should know that you're just not going to be safe in a FEMA center, I'm sorry. Anyway, while they're in this FEMA center, which is very clearly just a rented office, they have a meeting with, like, the heads of the military to sort of, like, uncover what's happening here. They then get news that a snake has attacked a train in Japan. Ooh, I wonder what that's a reference to. The sisters bicker a bit about why they've been estranged for an extended period of time. It's all very standard. And then during this bicker session, one of the sisters says, "Wait, what did you just say? What did you just say?" It's that scene in movies where it's like, you hear one thing, and it's like, wait a minute. What did you just say about the snake in Japan? And that's when the sisters realize, oh, okay, so all these monsters, they're from, like, the Asylum films. The piranha that attacked the ship, Asylum. The alligator that attacked DC, Asylum. The snake that attacked the train, Asylum. And this theory is confirmed when the FCC agents show up with Michael Gaglio, who's an actor who's been in several different Asylum films. Gaglio actually plays himself in this movie, and he does quite a good job. Most likely based on his litany of experience working on these films. It's at this point that we get the confirmation of what's exactly going on here. It's essentially an alien invasion. Turns out the reason that streaming for all the Asylum movies have gone up is because aliens who are trying to repopulate their planet have binged the Asylum movies and have decided to replicate the monsters that they have seen in these movies as a way to disorient human governments. That way they can use the human population to repopulate their species. It's kind of similar to like that Adam Sandler movie Pixels, where the video game capsule was shot into space in the 80s, and when an alien civilization finally found it, they were all like, oh, Earth is a warlike culture, let's take the war to them. The only difference is that in this movie, it's somehow more stupid than it is in Pixels, if you could believe it. Also, side note, the aliens look dumb. The makeup is okay, but they're just wearing, like, synthetic black hoods with, like, airsoft body armor. It's very cheap looking. And it is a cheap movie, I get it, but come on. Also, the aliens kinda look like they're wearing blackface. Like, they're not. I think the face paint's like a dark blue or green, but it kinda looks like blackface. Just putting that out there. Although I will say that the masks that the aliens wear actually look better than the makeup itself. Another thing worth bringing up is that the aliens in this movie are, like, really stupid. Like, when the FCC people show up, they're able to show that the monsters are attacking in the order of the most popular Asylum streamed films, which is what the aliens have been streaming. So once they figure that out, they're able to anticipate the next attack, which is like a 5-headed shark. And the aliens are like, oh, curses, how did the humans figure this out? Because you transparently streamed their movies in a way that could be recorded. Stupid. What are you doing? Anyway, the various people at this FEMA center have decided to split up and do their own plans. The president's going to get locked in a bunker. Quinn wants to research a crashed drone to see what she can do about the natural disasters, the monsters, and the aliens. Madoylyn wants to go back to her robot mech to see if she can fight some of the monsters. And it's all very boring. At a certain point near the third act, we end up getting into like a body snatchers situation where aliens start assimilating human beings. There's like a big final battle between like Madoylyn's giant robot and like this amalgamation of like all the Asylum monsters. Quinn has to like commandeer the alien spaceship to like destroy a Sharknado that's formed. The only black guy in the movie dies, and he dies before any other character, which is standard. Can't really complain about that. But yeah, by the end of the movie, while a lot of humans have been assimilated, including the girl's father, who is, the acting president, they eventually defeat all the monsters, they defeat the aliens, Madoylyn and Quinn close the gap in their relationship, and decide that together they can rebuild a better world, or something. I didn't care. I'm going to be honest with this one, guys. This movie was hard for me to watch. I try to be as positive as I can on this channel. I genuinely like movies. I like most of the movies I watch. This was a tough one to trog through. And like I said, something that baffled me is that this was their 25th anniversary film, and barely anything about it feels epic or unique. So much of it is drawn out and boring. Seeing Michael Gaglio is nice. As an Asylum veteran, he sort of breathes life and passion into this film where there really isn't any. The film is competently shot. It's lit well. None of the camera work particularly stands out, but everything's okay. There's some cozy moments here and there in the fake FEMA center that they're in. But really, this... I watched this movie on streaming with ads, and every time an ad popped up, I just got a relief. Because I was like, 90 seconds where I could just recuperate. It was genuinely tough for me to get through. Sharknado is funny. The Sharknado movies are funny, and they get progressively more ridiculous over time, but they're funny movies. They're entertaining. Snakes on a Train is boring, but there's sort of a mystical quality about the film that sort of brings you in, and they make an attempt to develop the various characters on the train. That way you're somewhat invested in them when the train starts to derail. But this was just kind of a dud. I don't know what to tell you. I didn't have a good time watching it. Maybe I'd have a better time if I had actually watched more of the movies that the film had referenced, but even when I saw the Sharknado in this movie, I was like, what is this? I was like, oh, cool, it's the thing from your most successful franchise, cool. I mean, it was fun to see the snake eating the train, but I was like, well, this isn't exactly right, is it? I get that this movie is supposed to be an ad for other Asylum movies, but I don't even think it does a good job advertising their other films. It references them a bunch, but nothing made me feel like I needed to go out of my way to watch these other films and understand the references. It all just felt kind of cheap and not in a good way. There's a difference between not having resources and not trying, and it didn't really feel like this film tried. There's plenty of cheap movies that try. I've talked about Clerks a million times, it's one of my favorite movies. The film costs less than $30,000 and it's a masterpiece. And other filmmakers have gotten their starts with smaller budgets than that. Robert Rodriguez's first film, El Mariachi, was $7,000. Christopher Nolan's first film, The Following, was $6,000. Steven Spielberg shot his first film when he was 17 years old for $500. It's possible to get somewhere with a small amount of money. But watching a film like this, it didn't really feel like they wanted to get anywhere. It didn't even feel like they wanted to really celebrate what they were known for. Also, to hammer home how cheap the movie is, there's a scene where the giant piranha attacks a cruise ship, and when you see footage on the cruise ship, it just looks like a cruise ad, and it probably is. I didn't back that up, it's just an entirely different style of footage. I'm pretty sure it was just a cruise ad that they pulled from somewhere else. But yeah, I really don't know what to say about this. I really don't. I mean, there were certainly moments in this movie that I thought were interestingly done. When the black FCC guy is explaining why the DNA for the monsters is so bad, hence why they keep dying so easily. He uses the analogy of film compression, saying that if you try to stream something in 16K, but you don't have a 16K TV, that it will just default to standard def. And that's why the monsters have bad DNA. Not only did I think that was an interesting in-canon explanation for why the creatures were easily defeated, but I also liked it as sort of a meta justification for why they looked like bad CGI. It's oh, well, they should be rendered like this, but they're actually coming out like this. They're basically giant 3D printed creatures. I like that this movie obeyed the translation convention. For those of you who aren't familiar, the translation convention is basically when you have characters that speak a language that's foreign to the native language of the people watching the film, but it just comes out as the native language, that way we can understand it. In this film, when you listen to the aliens speak, it sounds like they're speaking English, but when the characters in the movie come in contact with aliens, it sounds like an alien language. So I thought that was a nice little detail. Nice little attention to, like, world mechanics, I guess. But, like I said, this movie just doesn't work for me. Awkward editing, flat performances, no real sense of narrative build-up. Maybe I'll rewatch it again sometime in the future to see if my opinion changes. Maybe I need to watch more Asylum films, but Another thing about the film that personally bugged me, and this is 100% a nitpick, but in the movie they call UFOs UAPs, which is the new preferred term. Like, that term was just invented, I think, like, less than 10 years ago. And the term was invented literally just as a way to get UFO truthers to shut up. But, I don't like it. Just say UFO. It's a sci-fi movie. Say UFO. What are you ashamed of? You trying to make this sound serious and official? It's an Asylum movie. Come on. Like, I am really sorry if you came here, like, expecting a breakdown of, like, all the references and just unmitigated praise for how fun Asylum movies are, but yeah, I can't give you that. I didn't have a fun time watching this movie. And who knows, maybe I missed something. Maybe they'll make a sequel on their 30th anniversary. Who knows? I'm just saying, I felt like 2025 Armageddon left something to be desired for me. Honestly, at this point, I just want to watch a different movie to get the taste of this one out of my mouth. Like, seriously, I'd rather be watching something like Armageddon or Velocipaster. Because while those movies are, like, cheap, at least they're fun. Like, at least they know what they are, and they make an effort to entertain the viewer and get the viewer to laugh. And that's what I really feel is, like, missing here with 2025 Armageddon. Like, I did not laugh once when I watched this movie. Not once. You know, this is just really a great way to start the year. Like, I honestly think that this is the first movie I've sat down to review that I really don't appreciate, like, on any level. Like, there's elements of the movie that I like, but nothing clicks together for me. Nothing feels coherent. It all just feels very lazy. Like, even when I review a movie that I don't like Cuck, for instance, I can at least latch on to elements of it and say, hey, this worked. Hey, they did this really well. Or, hey, at least they tried. But yeah, no. And you know, I don't want this to get redundant. I don't want to just say, well, this sucked, this sucked, this sucked, this sucked. But, the movie's not leaving me with a lot of options. But, in any case, I hope you all enjoyed my review of this movie. Please feel free to subscribe if you're feeling generous. You can also follow me on Instagram or Letterboxd if you want to hear more of my film takes. Well, let's all hope 2025 is better than this movie. And I will see you all later. What better way to start the year than a new entry into my raffle? Now, for those of you who don't know, I am doing a cumulative giveaway for when I reach my first 500 subscribers. Basically, every few videos, I'm going to include a new item into a pot that will slowly grow over time, and when I reach my first 500 subscribers, I'm going to give that pot away. To start off the new year, since I just talked to you about a shitty monster movie, I figured I'd add this Monsterverse patch to my pot. Obviously, this is the new Universal Monsterverse with Godzilla and Kong and whatever, but one monster franchise, other monster franchise, I've said before, these links could be tenuous. So that's 3 items in the pot so far. If you would like to be entered into my raffle, all you need to do is subscribe and comment under this video. I will announce the winner when I reach my first 500. So good luck to you all.